Remember the Alamo? What if I told you that Saving the Alamo wasn't just a patriotic Western about Texas independence? It was a battlefield of egos, budget blowouts, and near-fatal miscalculations all playing out under the blazing San Antonio sun. While audiences saw heroic last stands and noble sacrifice, behind the cameras, director John Wayne fought a war of his own against studio executives, scorching heat, and his own inexperience at the helm. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on The Alamo, yes, the 1960 epic starring, produced and directed by John Wayne, and revealing 20 bizarre, forgotten, and absolutely wild truths that never made it into the history books or the credits. So hit play and prepare to see The Alamo like you never have before. John Wayne mortgaged his house twice. It wasn't a passion project. It was financial warfare. John Wayne didn't just want to star in The Alamo. He needed to control it. After studios rejected his vision as too expensive and too slow, Wayne took matters into his own hands. He poured over $1 million of his own money into the film, nearly all of it from personal loans, and by mortgaging his home not once, but twice. He even sold off future royalties from his earlier hits to keep the cameras rolling. At one point, production halted for 3 weeks because payroll couldn't be met. Crew members were paid in IOUs. What audiences didn't know was that every frame of that sprawling Texas landscape was backed by Wayne's personal ruin or glory gamble. And if the film flopped, he'd be bankrupt forever. Instead of resting on his laurels, Wayne bet his entire legacy and livelihood on a story about defiance in the face of impossible odds. Fitting, isn't it? The set was bigger than most real towns. Forget backlots. John Wayne didn't rebuild the Alamo. He built an entire 1830s Texas frontier from scratch. On 12,000 acres of ranch land outside Brackettville, Texas, his crew constructed over 200 structures. Blacksmith shops, saloons, cabins, stables, even a working grist mill. It wasn't just a set. It was a functional ghost town larger than many actual municipalities in West Texas. Locals were hired as extras and carpenters. Horses grazed where camera cranes would later rise. The compound had its own water supply, electrical grid, and mess hall feeding hundreds daily. And here's the kicker. Wayne insisted every building be historically accurate, down to the handmade nails. When scouts suggested using existing towns for cost savings, Wayne reportedly snapped, "This isn't a movie. It's the movie." The set was so vast that crew members got lost, and one assistant director broke his leg chasing a runaway mule through the replica streets. That town still stands today as a tourist attraction. A monument, not just to Texas history, but to Wayne's obsessive scale. The opening battle scene took 22 days to film. It wasn't choreographed. It was orchestrated like a real war. The massive opening assault, where Mexican forces stormed the Alamo walls, required 4,000 extras, dozens of horses, and pyrotechnics so intense that nearby ranchers filed noise complaints. Shooting lasted 22 grueling days in 110-degree heat. Actors wore wool uniforms, and multiple extras suffered heat stroke. One stuntman passed out mid-explosion and had to be dragged to safety by crew using ladders. Wayne shot the sequence with 14 cameras simultaneously, a rarity in 1960, to capture every angle without reshoots. But here's the twist. The scene was filmed first, before the script was even finalized. Wayne believed if he could nail the battle's realism, the rest would follow. He was right, but at a cost. The dailies reportedly ran over 30 hours of footage. Editors later called it a mosaic of chaos. Yet that opening assault became the film's spine, a brutal, immersive plunge into the chaos of war that still stuns viewers today. Richard Widmark hated playing Jim Bowie. It wasn't a dream role. It was a trap. Richard Widmark, known for his sharp, cynical characters, reluctantly accepted the part of Jim Bowie only after Wayne personally pleaded with him. Off camera, Widmark clashed constantly with Wayne over the script's glorified tone. Bowie wasn't a saint, Widmark argued during one heated rehearsal. He was a land speculator with a knife. Wayne insisted on heroism. The tension bled into every scene. In the film's famous sickbed sequence, Widmark's exhaustion wasn't acting. He'd been up for 36 hours straight after a scheduling snafu stranded him in a trailer with no AC. And that quiet intensity in his eyes, that was genuine frustration. Despite their differences, Widmark later admitted, John may have been wrong about history, but he was right about heart. Still, he never worked with Wayne again. Their on-screen camaraderie masked a professional rift that never fully healed. Lawrence Harvey was almost fired twice. He wasn't just British. He was nearly banished. Casting Lawrence Harvey, a Lithuanian-born actor raised in South Africa, as William B. Travis, raised eyebrows. Texans demanded a native son, but Wayne fought for him, saying Harvey had the fire of a martyr. Behind the scenes, however, Harvey's aloof demeanor and thick accent infuriated crew members. During a tense night shoot, he snapped at a grip who mispositioned a lantern, sparking a near fistfight. Wayne intervened, but privately warned Harvey, "One more outburst, and you're walking home." Worse, Harvey struggled with horseback riding, a key requirement for Travis. Stunt doubles were used extensively, but in wide shots, his stiff posture betrayed inexperience. Yet Harvey poured himself into the role, studying Travis's letters obsessively. That final speech before the battle, he rewrote it himself the night before. What audiences saw as noble resolve was actually Harvey's quiet rebellion, a foreigner claiming a piece of Americans. Myth. The film used real antique weapons, many still loaded. It wasn't props. It was archaeology. To ensure authenticity, the production sourced actual 1830s-era muskets, rifles, and cannons, many purchased from private collectors or dug up from Texas riverbeds. Some were so old, their barrels hadn't been cleaned in a century. During a test firing, one cannon exploded, sending shrapnel into a nearby oak tree. After that, the armorer insisted on disassembling each weapon, but time ran out. On shoot days, actors handled firearms that still contained live black powder residue. Safety officers were horrified. One extra nearly lost an eye when a musket misfired during a close-up. Despite the risks, Wayne refused modern replicas. "If it's not real," he said, "the audience will feel the lie." Miraculously, no one died, but several crew members walked away with permanent hearing damage from unsilenced cannon blasts. In an era before strict safety protocols, the Alamo played with fire literally and figuratively. The costumes were so accurate, they caused illness. Not just stitched, they were suffocating. Costume designer Yvonne Wood insisted on using period-correct materials: rough-spun wool, untreated leather, stiff cotton, dyed with natural pigments. But authenticity came at a price. In the Texas summer, temperatures inside those layers soared past 130 degrees. Several actors developed heat rash, so severe, medics applied ointment between takes. Richard Widmark's Bowie coat had to be cut open at the back, just to let him breathe during his sickbed scenes. And the iconic coonskin cap worn by Chill Wills? It was real raccoon fur, uncured and uncleaned. After 3 days, it began to rot in the sun, emitting a stench so foul that nearby extras gagged. Still, Wayne forbade modern fabrics. "If they suffered," he said, "we suffer." The result? Performances etched with real discomfort. You don't just see heroes on screen, you feel their sweat, their itch, their exhaustion. That's not acting. That's endurance. John Wayne's directorial debut almost ended in mutiny. It wasn't an experience. It was insubordination. Though Wayne had acted for decades, The Alamo marked his first time behind the camera, and his authoritarian style ruffled feathers fast. He'd rewrite scenes on the spot, ignore call sheets, and demand retakes for vibe rather than continuity. Cinematographer William Clothier, a veteran of dozens of westerns, quit after Wayne overruled his lighting setup for the 12th time. "He's not a director," Clothier muttered on his way out. "He's a dictator with a megaphone." Worse, assistant directors began coordinating secretly via walkie-talkie to bypass Wayne's erratic orders. At one point, the entire sound crew walked off set after Wayne insisted on recording dialogue during a live cannon barrage. Only a personal plea from co-star Frankie Avalon convinced them to return. What audiences never saw was the silent rebellion simmering beneath each majestic shot, a crew pushed to the edge by a star who refused to compromise. The film's score was composed in a trailer, during a dust storm, not in a studio, in a sandstorm. Composer Dmitry Tiomkin, fresh off High Noon and Giant, arrived in Texas to write the score on site, as Wayne believed the music should breathe the same air as the story. Tiomkin set up a piano in a converted Airstream trailer near the set. One afternoon, a massive dust storm rolled in, coating every surface in fine silt. Rather than stop, Tiomkin composed through it, windows sealed, piano covered in sheets, sand crunching underfoot. Legend says the main theme's mournful horn line was inspired by the howling wind outside. He worked 18-hour days, often scoring scenes the same night they were filmed. When the orchestra later recorded in Hollywood, musicians struggled with the Texas grit in the notation, unexpected pauses, irregular rhythms mimicking hoofbeats, and distant gunfire. The result? A soundtrack that didn't just accompany the film, it haunted it. Tiomkin won an Oscar nomination and never worked on location again. The final battle had no stunt coordinators. It wasn't choreographed, it was chaos. In today's films, a single explosion requires a safety team, permits, and rehearsals. In 1960, John Wayne handed actors blanks, pointed them toward the Alamo walls, and shouted, "Give me truth." There was no official stunt coordinator. Instead, veteran stuntmen like Fred Kennedy organized themselves, using hand signals to time falls and explosions. During one take, a pyrotechnic charge detonated early, sending actor Ken Curtis flying luckily onto a pile of hay he'd insisted on stacking, just in case. Another time, a horse bolted mid-charge, trampling 2 extras. Miraculously, no one died, but injuries were so common, the on-set medic kept a casualty log. What audiences saw as heroic sacrifice was often genuine panic. And that final shot of Wayne's Crockett falling? He refused to double. He took the hit himself, landing hard on packed earth, bruising his ribs for weeks. This wasn't movie magic. It was madness. The Texas premiere sparked a real political uproar. Not just a red carpet. It was a cultural lightning rod. When The Alamo premiered in San Antonio in October 1960, it wasn't just celebrities in attendance. Texas politicians, historians, and descendants of Alamo defenders filled the theater. But the film's portrayal of Mexican General Santa Anna as a tyrant ignited protests from Mexican-American groups, who called it xenophobic propaganda. The governor of Texas had to issue a statement praising the film's patriotic spirit, while Mexico's ambassador condemned it as historically reckless. At the after-party, a heated argument broke out between a state senator and a Tejano historian over whether Davy Crockett really died fighting or surrendered. Newspapers ran editorials for weeks. Ironically, the controversy boosted box office, but it also exposed deep wounds in Texas identity. Wayne, ever defiant, said, "History's written by the winners. I just filmed it." The film's runtime was butchered twice. It wasn't edited, it was amputated. Wayne's original cut ran 3 hours and 22 minutes. A sprawling epic, with subplots about settlers, romance, and political debate. The studio, United Artists, demanded cuts for commercial viability. Wayne refused. So, they took it from him. The theatrical release was slashed to 2 hours and 45 minutes. Gone were entire character arcs, including a poignant scene where Travis writes his famous letter while watching his son sleep. Then, for television broadcast in 1963, it was cut again to under 2 hours. Wayne was furious. "They turned a symphony into a jingle," he lamented. Decades later, film scholars tried to reconstruct the lost footage, but much was destroyed or sold off as scrap film. What survives is a masterpiece, but a fragmented one. The full vision, lost to time, like the Alamo itself. Frankie Avalon was cast as a teen appeal gimmick, not for talent for ticket sales. At the height of his singing fame, Frankie Avalon was a teen idol with no acting resume beyond beach movies. Wayne's producers insisted on casting him as Smitty, a young courier, to draw the youth market. Wayne hated the idea, but relented under financial pressure. On set, Avalon was mocked by veteran actors for his pop star softness. Yet he trained relentlessly, learning to ride, shoot, and even clean his own gear. During a night shoot, he stayed on set for 14 hours without complaint, while others retreated to trailers. Wayne, impressed, gave him an extra close-up in the final battle. Avalon later said, "I wasn't there to sing. I was there to earn my spurs." That one casting compromise may have saved the film's box office and quietly transformed a teen idol into a serious performer. The Alamo set was built on sacred indigenous land, not just ranch land. It was contested ground. The 12,000-acre site near Bracketville sat atop ancestral lands of the Lipan Apache, who had been displaced centuries earlier. During excavation, workers uncovered arrowheads, pottery shards, and burial markers. Rather than halt construction, Wayne's team quietly reburied the artifacts and pressed on. Local Apache elders protested, but their voices were ignored. Years later, descendants would point to the set's eerie bad luck fires, injuries, equipment failures as spiritual retribution. The irony: a film celebrating resistance was built on erased history. Wayne never addressed it publicly, but in private journals, a crew member noted, "John walked the perimeter at dawn, hat in hand. Said it felt like someone was watching."
The film's marketing budget was larger than most movies' entire cost. Not hype, it was a blitzkrieg. United Artists spent over $2 million on promotion, more than the total budget of many 1960 films. Billboards stretched from New York to Los Angeles. Radio ads played hourly. John Wayne even flew cross-country in a private plane, branded with the Alamo logo, landing in small towns to give speeches. In Texas, schools received free study guides. Churches hosted Alamo Sundays. The campaign framed the film not as entertainment, but as civic duty. See it, one ad urged, or forget who you are. The strategy worked. The Alamo became a cultural event, but it also set a dangerous precedent. Movies as national myth-making machines. Critics called it propaganda. Wayne called it patriotism. Either way, Hollywood never marketed a film the same way again. A real rattlesnake nearly killed a lead actor. Not a prop, a predator. During a scene where Bowie recovers in his sickbed, a live rattlesnake slithered onto the set, drawn by the scent of animal blood used in battle effects. It coiled under Widmark's cot. A crew member spotted it just as Widmark shifted position. Animal wranglers rushed in with hooks, but the snake struck missing Widmark by inches. Filming halted for hours while the area was cleared. Later, Wayne insisted on using rubber snakes, but the damage was done. Widmark developed a lifelong phobia. "I still hear that buzz in my dreams," he admitted years later. The moment, never shown on screen, became legend among crew. A reminder that history and nature always bites back. The film's Oscar loss devastated John Wayne. Not disappointment, it was devastation. The Alamo earned 7 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. Wayne expected at least a win for score or cinematography. Instead, it lost Best Picture to The Apartment, a quiet comedy about corporate infidelity. At the ceremony, Wayne sat stone-faced. Later, he told friends, they chose cynicism over courage. The loss haunted him for years. He even blamed it for his later political turn, saying Hollywood rewarded weakness. Yet history vindicated him. The Alamo is now preserved in the National Film Registry, but in 1961, that honor felt like ashes. The man who bet everything on heroism watched as the industry crowned irony. The Mexican army was played by U.S. soldiers, not actors' active duty troops. To portray Santa Anna's forces, the production recruited over 200 U.S. Army soldiers stationed at Fort Bliss. They trained for weeks in 19th century drill formations, but tensions flared when some soldiers, many of Mexican descent, refused to play villains. One private reportedly said, "My abuelo fought for Texas. I won't play the enemy." Wayne, surprisingly, listened. He rewrote several scenes to show Mexican soldiers as disciplined and brave, just on the wrong side of history. That subtle shift, barely noticeable to audiences, was a quiet act of respect. The soldiers performed with such precision. Their march formations were later studied by military historians. In the end, the enemy brought unexpected dignity to the film. John Wayne wore the same boots, offset for years. Not a costume, a keepsake. Wayne's Davy Crockett boots, hand-stitched leather with brass spurs, became his off-camera uniform. He wore them to dinners, meetings, even his daughter's graduation. "They remind me what it costs to stand for something," he told an interviewer. After filming Wrapped, he kept them on a shelf beside his desk. When he died in 1979, his family placed one boot in his casket. The other sits in the John Wayne Museum, a relic not of a character, but of a crusade. That's how deeply the Alamo lived in him. It wasn't a role, it was a reckoning. The film inspired a real Alamo preservation movement. Not just entertainment, it sparked action. After the film's release, donations to the Real Alamo mission in San Antonio tripled. Schoolchildren sent pennies in jars. Veterans organized cleanup days. A non-profit formed to restore crumbling walls. Even critics of the film's accuracy admitted it woke people up to what we'd forgotten. Today, the Alamo is a UNESCO site, partly thanks to Wayne's cinematic monument. Irony? The film that rewrote history ended up saving it. The Alamo wasn't just a movie. It was a monument built in celluloid, sweat, and sheer will. John Wayne didn't just tell a story, he carved it into the earth. And though historians debate its accuracy, one truth remains. It made America remember. If you've ever stood a little taller because of a film, if you've ever believed in something against all odds, then you've felt the echo of the Alamo. So, hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell, because history isn't just what happened. It's what we choose to save. Remember the truth. Remember the Alamo.